Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder, a Hannah Swenson Mystery by Joanne Fluke. Chapter 1, Part 1. Hannah Swenson slipped into the old leather bomber jacket that she'd rescued from the Helping Hands thrift store and reached down to pick up the huge orange tomcat that was rubbing against her ankles. "Okay, Moish, you can have one refill, but that's it until tonight." As she carried Moish into the kitchen and set him down by his food bowl, Hannah remembered the day he'd set up camp outside her condo door. He'd looked positively disreputable, covered with matted fur and grime, and she'd immediately taken him in. Who else would adopt a 25-pound, half-blind cat with a torn ear? Hannah had named him Moish, and though he certainly wouldn't have won any prizes at the Lake Eden Cat Fanciers Club, there had been an instant bond between them. They were both battle-worn, Hannah from weekly confrontations with her mother, and Moish from his hard life on the streets. Moish rumbled in contentment as Hannah filled his bowl. He seemed properly grateful that he no longer had to scrounge for food and shelter, and he showed his appreciation in countless ways. Just this morning, Hannah had found the hindquarters of a mouse in the center of the kitchen table, right next to the drooping African violet that she kept forgetting to water. While most of her female contemporaries would have screamed for their husbands to remove the disgusting sight, Hannah had picked up the carcass by the tail and praised Moish lavishly for keeping her condo rodent-free. "See you tonight, Moish." Hannah gave him an affectionate pat and snatched up her car keys. She was pulling on her leather gloves, preparing to leave when the phone rang. Hannah glanced at the apple-shaped wall clock, which she'd found at a garage sale. It was only 6 a.m. Her mother wouldn't call this early, would she? Moish looked up from his bowl with an expression that Hannah interpreted as sympathy. He didn't like Dolores Swenson, and he had done nothing to hide his feelings when she dropped in for surprise visits at her daughter's condo. After suffering through several pairs of shredded pantyhose, Dolores had decided that she would limit her socializing to their Tuesday night mother-daughter dinners. Hannah picked up the phone, cutting off the answering machine in mid-message, and sighed as she heard her mother's voice. "Hello, Mother. I'm ready to walk out the door, so we'll have to keep this short. I'm already late for work." Moish raised his tail and shook it, pointing his posterior at the phone. Hannah stifled a giggle at his antics and gave him a conspiratorial wink. "No, Mother, I didn't give Norman my phone number. If he wants to contact me, he'll have to look it up." Hannah frowned as her mother went into a familiar litany on the proper way to attract a man. Their dinner last night had been a disaster. When she'd arrived at her mother's house, Hannah had encountered 2 additional guests: her mother's newly widowed neighbor, Mrs. Carrie Rhodes, and her son, Norman. Hannah had been obligated to make polite conversation with Norman over sickeningly sweet Hawaiian pot roast and a chocolate-covered nut cake from the Red Owl grocery, as their respective mothers beamed happily and remarked on what a charming couple they made. "Look, Mother, I really have to..." Hannah stopped and rolled her eyes at the ceiling. Once Dolores got started on a subject, it was impossible to get a word in edgewise. Her mother believed that a woman approaching 30 ought to be married, and even though Hannah had argued that she liked her life the way it was, it hadn't prevented Dolores from introducing her to every single widowed or divorced man who'd set foot in Lake Eden. "Yes, Mother, Norman seems very nice, but..." Hannah winced as her mother continued to wax eloquent over Norman's good qualities. What on earth had convinced Dolores that her eldest daughter would be interested in a balding dentist, several years her senior, whose favorite topic of conversation was gum disease? "Excuse me, Mother, but I'm running late and..." Moish seemed to sense that his mistress was frustrated because he reached out with one orange paw and flipped over his food bowl. Hannah stared at him in surprise for a minute, and then she began to grin. Gotta run, mother. Moish just knocked over his food bowl and I've got mew mix all over the floor. Hannah cut off her mother's comments about Norman's earning capabilities in mid-breath and hung up the phone. Then she swept up the cat food, dumped it in the trash, and poured in fresh food for Moish. She added a couple of kitty treats, Moish's reward for being so clever, and left him munching contentedly as she rushed out the door. Hannah hurried down the steps to the underground garage, unlocked the door to her truck, and climbed in behind the wheel. When she'd opened her business, she'd bought a used Chevy Suburban from Cyril Murphy's car lot. She had painted it candy apple red, a color that was sure to attract notice wherever it was parked, and arranged for the name of her business, The Cookie Jar, to be painted in gold letters on the front doors. She'd even ordered a vanity license plate that read Cookies. As Hannah drove up the ramp that led to the ground level, she met her next-door neighbor coming home. Phil Plotnick worked nights at Del Rey Manufacturing, and Hannah rolled down the window to pass on the warning that their water would be shut off between 10 and noon. Then she used a gate card to exit the complex and turn north onto Old Lake Road. The interstate ran past Lake Eden, but most of the locals used Old Lake Road to get to town. It was a scenic road winding around Lake Eden. When the tourists arrived in the summer, some of them were confused by the names. Hannah always explained it with a smile when they asked. The lake was named Eden Lake, and the town that nestled next to its shore was called Lake Eden. There was a real nip in the air this morning, not unusual for the third week in October. Autumn was brief in Minnesota, a few weeks of turning leaves that caused everyone to snap photographs of the deep reds, gaudy oranges, and bright yellows. After the last leaf had fallen, leaving the branches stark and bare against the leaden skies, the cold north winds would start to blow. Then the first snowfall would arrive, to the delight of the children and the stoic sighs of the adults. While sledding, ice skating, and snowball fights might be fun for the kids, winter also meant mounds of snow that had to be shoveled, virtual isolation when the roads were bad, and temperatures that frequently dropped down to 30 or even 40 below zero. The summer people had left Eden Lake right after Labor Day weekend to return to their snug winter homes in the cities. The cabins on the lake shore stood vacant, their pipes wrapped with insulation to keep them from freezing in the sub-zero winter temperatures, and their windows boarded up against the icy winds that swept across the frozen surface of the lake. Now only the locals were in residence, and the population of Lake Eden, which nearly quadrupled over the summer months, was down to less than 3,000. As she idled at the stoplight on Old Lake Road and Dairy Avenue, Hannah saw a familiar sight. Ron Lascelles was standing by the dock of the Cozy Cow Dairy, loading his truck for his commercial route. By this time of the morning, Ron had finished delivering dairy products to his residential neighbors, placing their milk, cream, and eggs in the insulated boxes the dairy provided. The boxes were a necessity in Minnesota. They kept the contents cool in summer and protected them from freezing in the winter. Ron was cupping his jaw with one hand, and his pose was pensive, as if he were contemplating things more serious than the orders he had yet to deliver. Hannah would be seeing him later when he delivered her supplies, and she made a mental note to ask him what he'd been thinking about. Ron prided himself on his punctuality, and the Cozy Cow truck would pull up at her back door at precisely 7:35. After Ron had delivered her order, he'd come up into the coffee shop for a quick cup of coffee and a warm cookie. Hannah would see him again at 3 in the afternoon, right after he'd finished his routes. That was when he'd picked up his standing order, a dozen cookies to go.